bring in Cliff May. He's founder and president of the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Cliff, good to see you. So this new entente, is this mere symbolism, or are we talking about a new stage of cooperation here?
Oh, very much a new stage of cooperation. It's a flourishing relationship. What do they have in common? Most important of all, they both want to diminish the United States. They both want really to end what has been the American-led, liberal, rules-based international order and replace it with an illiberal international order where they'd be the leaders and they'd make the rules. And by the way, at places like the UN, they've made substantial progress on this already in many ways. The UN Human Rights Council, obviously, the World Health Organization. Now, this is a very important entente between two powers that both former empires that want to reestablish and expand their empires in the present.
Okay, now each of them are now, I think it's fair to say, regional powers, and they want to, when you say they want to undermine the U.S. global order, is the first order of business for each of them to really dominate what I think some people call their spheres of influence, or what they'd like to think of as their spheres of influence. So in China, get the Americans out of the Western Pacific. In Russia's case, get the Americans out of Eastern Europe and Central Asia. And then they can dominate those regions. Are those primary goals?
Yeah, I think those are primary goals. That's the important next step. There are further steps they see, but absolutely, that's why you see the Chinese taking reefs in the South China Sea and making them into military installations, essentially trying to make the South China Sea into a Chinese lake. The threats against Taiwan, Russia has no problem with that. Russia had no problem with the stripping of Hong Kong of its autonomy and its various freedoms. Xi Jinping has no problem with Putin taking over Ukraine if that's what he wants to do and exerting more influence there. All that's good. All that weakens Western Europe. That's good from Xi Jinping's point of view. Both want to do that. And both see the Americans as the most important obstacle to that, and the Europeans secondary. But yeah, that's the immediate goal.
Okay, so how is their cooperation working to do that? You mentioned the UN, where they work together to make that essentially a feckless body in enforcing global rules. But how else are they working together to undermine U.S. interests?
So they have a treaty. It's a neighborliness and friendliness, which they've kind of revived and they're extending. They're talking about all kinds of increasing economic relationships, more trade, possibly finding ways around the financial system. The big threat right now to Russia, I would say, to Putin, in terms of Ukraine, is for the U.S. and the EU to do serious economic sanctions like de-SWIFTing, taking Russia off the international banking system.
Right.
They're talking about setting up their own system for that. They can't do that quickly, but they can do that over time. And it makes a difference that if Russia goes into Ukraine, the Security Council, China has a seat, and of course Russia does too. They know the UN will not in any way even be critical of them. So, and they're also making common cause with other authoritarians, not least the Islamic Republic of Iran. All the authoritarian regimes of any import want very much to decrease America's power and influence in the world. And even the whole idea of democracy as being something that nations should aspire to, they argue, no, authoritarianism is much more efficient, and it's really a better idea in the long run. The Belt and Road Initiative that China is doing is kind of a neo-imperialist, I would say, action, where they're all over the place and they're propping up dictators and doing things like, probably opening up a military port in Equatorial Guinea on the Atlantic, the Chinese would do, facing the United States. They're going to support each other in this and get other authoritarians to do the same. All
right. So what does the United States do about this, or is there anything we can do?
Well, we need stronger alliances and more productive alliances with our European friends. Too many of our European friends think, oh, there's a problem between China and Russia. We're somewhere in between. That shouldn't play. We need to take more action at the UN because that is the kind of architecture of the international order. I think it is useful and helpful that the EU is getting serious about sanctions on Russia, but there's a real threat in terms of Ukraine. I can't tell you exactly what Putin's going to do or when. Just as one terrible scenario, imagine that Putin goes into Ukraine, and simultaneously the Chinese, under Xi Jinping, go into Taiwan. That would cause considerable confusion, I would think, in the Biden administration and European capitals as well. The free and democratic countries need to come together, and they need stronger leadership, I would say, from the Biden administration than we've seen up to now.
So that diplomacy, and then I would assume as well also more military investment. All right, Cliff May, thanks so much for joining us.